The Disability and Disclosure Panel, as our panelists join us, and then I'll know what order they're sitting in. The Disability and Disclosure Panel was a panel that we felt quite compelled to include in the conference today in the marketplace because we know that releasing personal information about yourself for the first time for a very specific purpose can be a little bit nerve-wracking. And today, more job seekers with disabilities are entering the workforce. For persons with disabilities, finding and keeping work is usually no different than for those without disabilities. However, there may be additional things to consider, such as disclosure. If and when and how to tell people about your disability. So, let's see. Oh, we're doing some selfies. This is great. All right, so we're going to start here on my left with Lubna.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me.
Great, thank you. Emily, do we have mics for the panelists? Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to do an introduction of everybody here. So first and foremost, we have Lubna here on my left. Lubna Aslam is an experienced career counselor for youth, internationally qualified professionals, and persons with disabilities. She has a keen interest in developing strategic solutions for eliminating barriers faced by persons with disabilities. Lubna has a degree in mathematics and statistics and is also a certified constructivist career counselor. That's a big word. As a woman living with a spinal cord injury, she's committed to raising awareness, supporting employment equity, and contributing expertise towards building an inclusive Ontario. More recently, she has been the keynote speaker at the Canadian Helen Keller Centre's annual general meeting. Next to Lubna, I have David Maloney. David has been working with CIBC in various retail roles since May 2007. Thanks to his ongoing commitment to the inclusion and diverse beliefs of the bank, David has also volunteered with the CIBC Workability Employee Network, a support group of CIBC employees with disabilities and their supporters who advocate for the removal of all barriers in the workplace. During his time with Workability, David has been involved in many different activities, most notably being featured in media stories including CTV News, City News, and the Toronto Star. I have to say that when we got David's bio, I think it was about 8 pages long, and we had to scale it back a little bit. So if you want to know more about David, I encourage you to email him or Google him or Google the YouTube videos, because there's a lot of David presence online. Next to David, we have Amal Kandar. And she is a Director, Conduct and Compensation Risk with CIBC Enterprise Risk Management. As part of the Risk Management, Inclusion and Diversity Action Committee, Amal leads a subcommittee responsible for creating and executing tactics to create diverse teams across risk management. Prior to joining the risk management function, she took on a 6-month secondment with the Global Diversity Exchange at Ryerson University in helping them develop the Diversity Onboard Program expansion. Prior to risk management, Amal spent 12 years in a variety of roles in human resources at CIBC. Most notably, she was senior consultant in diversity and inclusion and a senior manager overseeing the corporate-wide campus recruitment programs where diversity recruitment was one of her key priorities. Amal lives in Toronto with her husband and twin boys. So it sounds like you have a very busy life. Next to Amal, we have Elaine Fliss. Elaine has a diverse career spanning government, association, not-for-profit, and corporate work. Her expertise lies in communications and public affairs. Her most notable job is working on the Honourable Dalton McGuinty's leadership campaign as a first job out of university. Elaine has also worked for Ontario's Attorney General, the Honourable John Gerritsen, Restaurants Canada as its Vice President for Ontario, and she currently owns her own business, EJF Consulting. In her spare time, Elaine enjoys writing, listening to music, and volunteering as a counselor with the TRCC. And last but not least, on the far side, we have Tanya Hickey. She is the Senior Manager of H&S Strategies at OPG. Under her portfolio, she manages the absence management programs and develops strategies around total health. This includes strategies around mental health and ensuring there are programs in place to assist employees at work and while recovering at home. Aside from her professional life, Tanya has a daughter with special needs and has become very empathetic and adept to understanding the challenges from the other perspective. She is also a volunteer ski instructor for 9 years with the Canadian Association for Disabled Skiing, assisting children and adults to experience the joy of participating in alpine sports. We could all give a round of applause to welcome our guests. Excellent. So now what we're going to do is we're going to ask each panelist, we're going to start here on my left with Lubna, to give us about 3 minutes telling us about their own experience with disability and disclosure.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much. I hope everyone can hear me. Can you hear me now? All right. Good morning, and thank you, everyone, for bearing with me. As a woman who lives with a spinal cord injury, and I've been living with a spinal cord injury for 16 years, the thought of being asked a question on why I need wheelchair access, or the fact that I need, why I use a wheelchair, if such a question is posed to me, I immediately feel afraid and I feel angry. So about 5 years ago, when I started searching for jobs, and I had to face questions regarding the accommodations that I need and understanding what and if and when I should disclose, I tried to prepare myself. I attended workshops, I got guidance of my employment counselor and from my job developer, but nothing helped me like practicing and understanding how to conquer my emotions. And this is what I do now as an employment counselor. I work with job seekers. All of them, you know, they need to practice how to ask, if to ask, and when to ask for an accommodation, and how to disclose. My go-to advice is always to practice, not just the questions that, you know, you anticipate will be asked, like, what accommodations can help you to be successful during the interviewing process? What accommodations can help you to be successful during the job, when you find a job? I also advise people to practice those questions that throw you off, the questions that are, why do you need a software, or questions around your disability that you may be uncomfortable with. Thank you.
Fantastic. David?
All right, good morning. My name is David Maloney. I'm going to speak about why I believe in the value of disclosing your disability in the workplace. When I entered the workforce in 2000, I did not fully realize how my disability, Asperger's syndrome, a form of autism, fully manifested itself. When I attended job interviews or was working in the retail sector, I generally did not disclose. Looking back, it occurs to me that those companies could not identify nor manage a person with a disability, which in turn led to missed expectations and disappointment for both my employers and I. My view on the importance of disclosure changed when, in 2007, I was hired to work at CIBC. It was through a people network called the CIBC Workability Employee Network that I learned about the value disclosure can bring as an employee with a disability. I came to this belief through the invaluable mentorship I received from senior managers like Amal Kander at CIBC, coupled with meeting leaders in the disability community. It was by means of my exposure to both those groups that I came to the genuine belief that as a person with a disability, there's strength in disclosing, as you would be identified as being a member of such a vast community, as you can see in this marvelous event, working to improve the lives of all people with disabilities. Since my disclosure and transferring into the role of mutual fund indexer, coupled with CIBC's sincere value for inclusivity and diversity in the workplace, I've developed considerable connections with a number of organizations within the disability community, especially with charitable organizations who work with those living with autism. Through this volunteer work, I've now started mentoring people on the spectrum, met with a number of employers through organizations such as RENA and Spinal Cord Injury Ontario that are actively recruiting people on the autism spectrum. and been extremely fortunate, and I mean extremely fortunate, to join the board of directors for Autism Ontario. In closing, I'd like to say that for an employee with a disability, that besides genuine values of inclusion and a range of diverse beliefs, it is vital to have a strong support system and accommodating and understanding leader. If these key concepts are not in place, then the employee may not disclose. To quote a noted advocate for the disability community on the value of employing people with disabilities, a man by the name of Mark Wafer, it's not just community service, it's good business. Thank you.
Amal?
So I think that I have a bit of a biased view on disclosure because I've worked for CIBC coming up on 15 years, so it's a very long time. And I would say that I work in a very inclusive environment where we say that people need to be able to bring their whole selves to work, and I really feel that people can bring their whole selves to work. Do I think every single leader is amazing and you can disclose? No, I don't. I don't think that. But I think that the culture that our CEO is trying to create is one of inclusiveness. And let me tell you a little story. So I was at a Lime Connect event recently. It was a networking reception for people with disabilities who are looking for employment. And for the first time, I met a little person. I've never interacted with a little person before. And I was determined to speak to him. And we met, and he's just an amazing guy. And we had coffee after. And he told me that he never disclosed through his trying to get a summer internship. And he didn't have a need to disclose because it didn't really change anything. And he started working in the summer in a business at one of the banks, not our bank, on the trading floor. And he's a little person who showed up to the trading floor, and I said, what was the reaction? And he said, dead silence, because he didn't need an accommodation. Now, had he disclosed, could it have changed the outcome? Maybe. Him and I were talking over coffee a couple weeks ago, and he said, you know, I have a friend who's also a little person, and he's having a hard time finding work. He didn't get a summer placement, and I said, well, what's the problem? He said, well, the first round interview is always on the phone, but he also has a stutter. And I said, you know, it's interesting that you say that because I've met with a number of candidates, probably 5 in the last few months, who all have a stutter. Now, the first round interview tends to be on the phone, and for somebody with a stutter, that's very difficult. So if I'm the person who's interviewing, I would want you to disclose so that I can make the effort to make sure that that meeting was in person to make it easier. So I think disclosure is a really personal thing, and I think it depends. And if you're in an environment where you can bring your whole self to work, then yes, I would say it's good to disclose. However, if you're in a different type of environment, I would question if I really wanted to work there. And I have a colleague who works with me on our diversity recruitment strategy for risk. His name is Tim Rose, who's very well known in the disability space. And he talks about his disability being an asset. And you know, when you look at Tim, he's in a wheelchair. But when you get to know Tim, you realize there's strengths he has that I will never have. And I think that's the place that we want to get to see that there are strengths that people have, and everybody has strengths that we just need to break down barriers so that they can reach their full potential. So that's what I feel. I know it's easier said than done.
Thank you so much, Amal. Elaine.
Hi, thank you everyone. I'd like to thank everyone for having me here today and for being up with this wonderful panel. And I think my talk follows nicely after Amal's in the sense that disclosure to me is very personal, but it's also very important. And I've always been a big advocate of disclosure. My disability is, I guess, what you would call a hidden disability, which is a mental health health disorder, and I have bipolar disorder, which I'm very open about talking about, which is also known as manic depressive illness. And not that it matters, to be honest, but for a number of years, it's been managed. And I've been a high functioning, I guess what they call high functioning bipolar. In my last position, the employers and the employees that I had, my colleagues, were very supportive of my disorder until it came time to Mental Health Week. And Mental Health Week came, and Human Resources asked me if I would write a story. So I was glad to write a story. I thought, absolutely, I'd love to write a story because I am so positive about disclosure and talking about it and being open about having bipolar. So I wrote the story, and it actually went up to the vice president and the chair of my department, and they came down with my story to my director and said, you know, is Elaine sure that she wants to publish this? And I thought to myself, really? Like, why wouldn't I want to publish it? It's my story. There's nothing in it that is, and even if there was anything in it, that it's my story and it's what I wanted to put out there. So I actually had to convince them to put it in the book, and HR was very, very warm and receptive. But as a result, a couple of months later, I was laid off. So I don't know if that has anything to do with it or not. But that was kind of interesting. And so ever since then, I do own my own consulting company, as Angela had mentioned, but I also am looking for full-time employment. And one of the challenges I'm finding is that a lot of the resumes and CVs have to go through an online portal. And on the online portal, for a lot of the larger companies, they ask, do you have a disability, hidden or visible? And so for the first 6 months of my job search, I actually put yes, because I thought it was very positive. And I wasn't getting any callbacks. And again, I don't know if there was any correlation or anything like that, but I wasn't getting any callbacks. So then I decided to change my tune and put no, and then all of a sudden I started to get callbacks. So I guess the moral of my little path and my story is, for someone who is a big person and in support of disclosure, I do support disclosing, but after you get into a company, and find some people that are supportive within that company, because I think there will be some people within that company or organization or association, whatever work it is you choose to do, and disclose to them if you feel comfortable, but only if you feel comfortable. And again, do whatever makes you feel comfortable and makes you feel whole. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elaine. Tanya.
Good morning, everybody. I work for Ontario Power Generation, and I'm very proud to say that we are very diverse and inclusive within our organization. I'm sitting here listening to everyone in the panel, and it's great to see advocates like yourself. It makes a huge difference. And like yourself as well, I think it's really important to talk about it, and I think it's making a really big difference in our communities as a whole. If I look back 10, 15 years ago, Ontario Power Generation looked very, very different. I would be your poster child, blonde hair, white skin. Now we're very, very diverse, and we're also very, very inclusive. And it's through education and communication within our organization that's made a huge difference. We've got diversity and inclusion committees at all of our work centers, which are also tripartite, which means we've got management as well as our 2 unions represented. And we do a lot around awareness, whether it be bullying, mental health, Aboriginals. We take a lot of effort into that. And in my role, I oversee the health and safety strategies for our organization. And one of the challenges are we do ask people to self-disclose for a number of reasons. One is we've got our own internal mandate that we want to make sure that we've got a good diverse work group. So we're a publicly run entity, so we do report to the Auditor General, and we get audited against that. So we do want to show that we are being diverse and inclusive. But I also think it's the best thing to do. We want your best self coming to work. We think you will be better, more productive if we can give you the tools to succeed. And if that means an accommodation, by all means, we will do what we can to accommodate. We have approximately 9,500 employees at OPG, and there are just under 400 employees that are permanently accommodated. So this does not include the people who go off for short-term illnesses or long-term illnesses and are returning to work and are accommodated for a short period of time. We have almost 400 that have permanent accommodations. And we know that by accommodating individuals that require these accommodations, then they will be better equipped to succeed. We don't need to disclose what the issue is. We just have to communicate the accommodations. So OPG takes very strict pride in making sure that everything is confidential and does not influence hiring, promotions, anything like that. So it makes me sad when I hear things when you think that disclosing could be a barrier. I like to think as a community we are making strides, and I think through events like this and continuing to raise awareness and having these conversations, people will understand. For example, we just, tomorrow and today's Monday, tomorrow and Wednesday, we're holding our last session for mental health first aid training. We will have trained 2,400 people leaders within our organization. And just having that awareness and understanding of mental health issues and how people can have conversations with individuals and understand that all you need to do is support them, have a conversation and work with them, and it makes a really big difference. I've seen our culture change a lot in 3 months. So congratulations for being an advocate. It really is making a difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. Okay, so I've been jotting down a few questions while each of you have been speaking, and I encourage all of you out there, if you have questions for the panel, I'm going to ask a few, and then we'll open it up to the audience and encourage some questions from the floor. We do have somebody with a mic that will be available to come to you if you have a question. So just stand up and raise your hand, and we'll have somebody come to you with a microphone. I know some of you do have loud voices like me, but in order for our interpreters and people who are using special devices here today, we do have to make sure that all dialogue happens through a microphone, okay? Thank you. Just one sec, I'm gonna ask a few questions first. All right, so one of the things that you all talked about is you talked about the timing of your disclosure. And I'm just curious, what do people, now Lubna, you specifically, you talk about supporting individuals with disabilities in finding work. What do you recommend to your clients in terms of when they should disclose and how they should disclose their disability? No, it's still not working.
So there is a technical answer, and then there is the realistic answer I have for you. The 5 places that people can disclose is: 1, when you are setting up the online profile with an employer that has that facility, where you self-identify as a person with a disability. The other area would be if you have a telephone interview and you have a speech impediment, and you want to notify them ahead of time that maybe instead of a telephone interview, you prefer like a chat interview or something else like that. So time of the telephone interview, time of the interview, when you start your job. And the 5th one is when you are in the job and your needs change. You have a primary disability, and then I have a spinal cord injury. I could get a pressure sore or any other secondary complications that could change the accommodations that are required. So those are the 5 spots where someone can ask for an accommodation and obviously invariably disclose that you are a person with a disability. But there is also the realistic approach. Now, this is where I really want people to understand what their comfort zone is and develop their personal narrative. If you are comfortable, because when you are someone who has an acquired disability, you do not go as a person who has a lot of pride. There's a period of adjustment, there's a period of acceptance, and then comes the pride. So depending upon where you are, you want to develop a story that you are comfortable telling. You need to know what it is that you are comfortable with disclosing. And for someone like me, I cannot get into a building. I have to ask for an accommodation. But this is not something that I want someone else to tell me. I want to come to that point myself, and I want to give that kind of allowance to my job seekers as well, that, okay, how are we going to answer this question? And if this is an accommodation, let's develop this together. So I like to come more realistic from them, intrinsic, like.
Great. I like your theme of kind of owning your own success in this area. It's pretty fantastic. David, now you talked about the time that you've been with CIBC. You've been there for quite some time, haven't you?
2007.
Wow, so 11 years. little more than 11 years. That's fantastic. So, but you did mention when you were in other industries and how there was a little more challenging around disclosing, and that almost they didn't even want to talk about disability. What do you think about the timing of how you should disclose, or would you disclose your disability with the other industries?
Well, it's all about feeling sufficiently supported. It's all about feeling, as a person with a disability, how are you valued as that employee? How is your manager supporting you? How included do you feel within that company? Do you feel that your senior leaders are supporting you? Do you feel that all your needs are being met? Do you feel like it's simple stuff, really and truly, but it's all about supporting the individual. Sure, there are limits, but you do the best you can with what you got.
Great.
Thank you, Angela.
Thank you. Amal, you had spoken a bit about how CIBC was supporting people. Now, I'm assuming that CIBC is an advocate for upfront disclosure so that you can help right out in front before they come in. How are you dealing with people who maybe have a disability that presents itself after they're already an employee?
So I know that we have a is this working? Can I? Yeah. I know we have a dedicated accommodation team at the bank. So if it's something that presents itself after, I mean, it's up to the candidate to disclose that they need some support and accommodation. And I've only heard great things about our accommodation team in the last while, that they will come out and meet with the candidate. One of our newest employee in risk is starting today. He's a deaf employee. And him and I are meeting later this afternoon, but he messaged me to say that his experience with the accommodation team before he even started was amazing, where they met with him to understand everything that he needs. We do have other deaf employees, but not every deaf person is the same, and each person has unique needs. So I think it's about when it presents itself that the candidate or the employee really needs to state that they have needs that need to be met, and the sooner that you do that, the better, because it's very difficult. I don't think you're supposed to suggest accommodations to people. I know that that's typically a no-no, so I know that the recruiters in the room won't like me for this, but I was meeting with someone not long ago, and it was just a coaching session, and they are not an employee, they're looking for work, and I tend to do this a lot, and the person has a stutter. And it was to the point where it was debilitating, and the nerves just got, and I'm known to be someone who generally can get people to relax and put them at ease, but everything I tried did not work. And I felt terrible, and the young woman started crying, and I said, well, is there something that we can do to help you get past it? Because every time she tried to speak, no words would come out. And she said no. I said, there's no accommodation, and I know I'm not supposed to ask that, but in this situation I did. And she said no. I said, well, there's a whiteboard right there. What if you started writing, and when you feel you can speak, you do that? And so she did. And it worked, and we got through that meeting, and it was a very successful meeting. And I said to her, well, what else can we possibly do? What could help you in an interview? Because your first interaction is an interview, and if you can't get past the interview, you're not going to be successful. And she said, I don't know. I said, well, you can write on a whiteboard. Or I said, if you look in our meeting room, every meeting room has a TV in it. I can hook up my laptop, I can open a blank document, and you can type. And she said, I can do that? I said, you can do whatever you need to be successful. So I said, why don't we set up another meeting next week, and we'll do a dry run interview, and I will pretend to interview you, and I'll have my computer there, and you can type every time you get stuck. So she did. We did that. She's now working at the bank, which is great. But I think it's important to be able to, and I know people don't like to ask for accommodation, but if it's going to be what makes you successful, then there's nothing wrong with it. I think the organization prefers that, and everybody around you would prefer that as well. So
Thank you. Elaine, you talked a little bit about sort of your last employment that was a little bit of a negative, or you think might have been a negative experience. What would you say now? So now you're leaving, you're not putting it on the applications, the online applications. At what point now would you feel comfortable disclosing to a potential employer, either as a consultant or looking for a full-time job?
That's a good question. At this time, what I would do and what I do is I generally, and this may not be the right thing to do, but I generally wait for someone else to mention having a mental health challenge or having a mental illness in the family, something like that. And then I'll disclose and I'll be like, oh, well, actually, you know, blah, blah, blah. Do you want to talk about it? You know, I have bipolar and, you know, I'm happy to talk about it with you or with your family member or with whoever is out there or yourself. So that would be my recommendation. But again, that's what works for me. And it's not a one-size-fits-all approach.
Right. And definitely then in what Amal has described, possibly missing out on some of the opportunities to have the accommodations, but in having some things in place that could make working easier for you and make you more successful, but at the same time be concerned about getting and keeping the job by disclosing at the wrong time. Yeah, for sure, for sure. Tanya, you work for another very supportive company, and what would you recommend in terms of people disclosing either, as I said to Amal, with something that presents itself after you are employed, after a period of time, or even at the time of applying for the position?
I'm of the same belief as Amal as well. I think you should disclose earlier to set yourself up for success. Specifically around interviews, they're very stressful on a lot of people. So if you've already got something that's a barrier to you that you don't feel comfortable and need another moat, then that's certainly a very good thing to have. But also when you're setting up your workstation, perhaps it needs to be set up a certain way. We've got a health team. We have 2 doctors and we've got a team of nurses. Everything is strictly confidential. We just need to set something up with the health services department, and then the accommodation would be set up. They do not disclose the reason behind the accommodation, just the accommodation, and it must be put in place and followed. So if you are blind or deaf, and we need to alter presentations for the team, by all means we'll do that, but we'll do whatever we can to make everybody succeed, the tools they have to succeed.
Great, thank you, thank you. I think now there were a few people who had some questions in the crowd. So I think there's a question over here, Annette, if you wanted to jump over, this gentleman here at the table. If you can tell us who your question is directed to as well.
Thanks very much, Angela. Actually, you asked the very same question I had for the panel, but let me try actually just summarize that.
Okay, great.
Mainly it goes to Lubna and the whole panel. I really appreciated your sharing the disclosure information with me. As a counselor, job developer, in an employment service provider, we deal with these kind of situations a lot on a daily basis. And through our trainings as counselors, we get trained to develop those tools to be able to communicate with people with various barriers, including disabilities. But still, it's a huge challenge for all of us. Now, towards the employers, true, the whole panel actually shared valuable information and disclosure experiences. But as a counselor, that's why I wanted to ask Lubna, is you try to develop trust, you try to develop those instances that candidate, client reach and trust you to share the information. I just wanted to ask you about that very delicate situation that you want to reach and open the doors for that person to open up about their disabilities, because it's not everybody wants to. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for your question. And you are right, not everybody wants to disclose. And I think it is good that we have this difference of opinions. Remember that a person's story or a person's lived experience is their lived experience. And we are counselors. Again, you cannot tell someone what to do. You can only guide them as what it is that may help them to be successful. And if you are aware and you have that relationship with the employer where you know that disclosing is not going to affect, and you are comfortable making that suggestion, you should. But if you feel that the person is not comfortable then you really shouldn't be pushing. I do not advocate pushing someone to disclose something that they're not comfortable doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Anybody else was wanting to ask anything? Okay, I've got, right here in the front.
Hello. Hi. Hi, I'm Brittany. I work for CIBC in talent acquisitions. I do the recruitment for risk management and internal audit. I had a question for yourself, Elaine. First of all, I think it's very brave of you to have disclosed the fact that you have a mental health situation. It's also very much a shame that you feel that you were laid off with the correlation of discussion. You know, that feeling there is, you know, I think a lot of people would probably have felt the same as you. What do you feel organisations can do, perhaps from leadership and senior management, to accommodate mental health? Because I do think a non-visible disability isn't looked into as much as a visible disability is. So what more do you think could be added to organisations as a whole?
Thank you for the question. That's a tough question because the organization I worked with was actually very pro-disclosure and was very, when it came to lip service to mental health, they were very positive about mental health, right from the top down to every echelon of the organization. So it's a tough one for me, but when I think about it, I think when actions speak louder than words, and I think when someone wants to actually produce an action from their words, that it should be supported. So not even if the CEO or the president or one of the chairs of the different departments, I don't know, maybe they hire someone with a mental health challenge. Maybe that brings more perspective to them. But it was an organization that was very active and continues to be very active in mental health awareness weeks, mental health days, all that good stuff. So they talk a good talk, but when it comes to practice, so I think it's just more awareness, and I do think it is more people speaking out and having the gumption to take that risk, because sadly I think it still is a little bit of a risk, at least from my perspective.
I think Tanya has something to add.
It's actually interesting that you brought that question up, because that was something that I was challenged with, and I could see that there was some struggles there. And I had done the mental health first aid training, and I ran 2 pilots. I did the senior CEOs, SVPs, and they thought, no, 2 days is a big investment to do this training. We don't have an issue. I don't see this being value added. And I said, can we do another pilot with the frontline managers? So I did that, and it was a resounding, oh my gosh, we need this training. This is the best training I ever had. So I think when we look at it from the CEO, senior leadership, they don't see the issues that are really happening, and so I don't think it's that they don't believe in it. I don't think they actually see that that's an issue until they've seen it demonstrated that way. So once we did that, and we changed a lot of the empathy around mental health and all the invisible disabilities, we've had a huge change, and now the senior management is now seeing the implication, because now our sick leave has changed, our people going off on mental health illnesses has decreased, our severity has decreased, our EFAP usage has increased. So we have all these indicators that show that it is actually working.
Amal?
Brittany, you would know this working at the bank, but I had read that we had done this, but then I saw it in my benefits, but we doubled our benefits for mental health, so for psychologists, psychiatrists, social workers. And then I think it's also through sharing stories, and CIBC does these stories on our intranet page, We Are CIBC, and it really puts the human side to the bank. And I know that Brittany's vice president, the vice president of talent acquisition, her story was featured, and it talked about, and I know her quite well, but I had never realized that she struggled with anxiety, debilitating anxiety. So I think it's through senior people sharing their stories, because they suffer from mental health issues too. Our senior vice president in finance, our deputy controller, she suffers from mental health issues too. So I think it doesn't discriminate. It doesn't stop the more senior you get. So I think it's through people sharing their own personal stories to show that you can be that successful and have a mental health challenge. I think that helps break down barriers as well.
Yeah, I'd actually like to add to that. Back in 2007, before I was hired by the bank, I was actually going through the CIBC Career Access program. And when we reached the in-person interview stage, Director, I think, of Employment Equity and Diversity, Tom Brzezowski, came to meet with us. And, well, as an applicant, I was actually floored by this, but he came in by means of a wheelchair. And I was in awe of what the bank did by having him come and speak to us, a senior executive who uses an assistive device, coming to meet with various job applicants. Just amazing.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you all for sharing. So a question then is that as somebody who I'm also an employer, is there anything at all that an employer should be afraid of in increasing the presence or increasing the encouragement to have their employees disclose more disabilities and request more accommodations? Anybody?
Could you ask that again?
So is there anything that employers should be afraid about? So you talked a lot about how CIBC, Amal, you talked about CIBC having a space where you're telling stories. I've heard lots of employers say, well, we've got this EAP program, or we've got these pieces that are happening in our organization, but we maybe don't want to talk about it a lot because we might see an increase in usage. We might see more expenses in the organization. What if people take more time off work? What if they require too many accommodations? It sounds like your experience has actually been the opposite. So is there anything that an employer should be afraid about or concerned about when trying to implement or increase awareness about these kinds of programs? Tanya?
Okay, so that was a fear.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie. But my argument was, yes, we may see an increase in incidents at the beginning. So, for example, if I look at the mental health issues, when we did the mental health first aid training, our incidents of people going off on mental health absences increased, but our duration decreased, which means they were getting help sooner as opposed to waiting till they were in a more critical state. Same as our EFAP usage. We encourage our people to use EFAP. It's there to help our employees. We pay a set amount, so whether we have a usage of 20% or 10%, we're going to pay the same price. So we encourage all of our employees to reach out and be proactive. Now we're also looking at doing health risk assessments where people can do a risk assessment and they ask questions and you get a score under mental health, physical health, work-life health, and work-life balance. And those things are going to point people towards our EFAP resources and other resources that we have to make people more aware of what they can do to bring their best self to work. So the way I look at it, you may pay a little bit more up front, but you're going to be much healthier people, more engaged people working for you in the long run. So it's a win-win for everybody.
Fantastic. Exactly what I wanted to hear.
Yeah, I was going to say too, I don't think that the employer should be concerned about it. And the reason being is I think to even my personal experience, when my director was aware of my challenges, if I woke up one day, I sometimes don't know how I'm going to wake up, whether I'm going to be in a mood or whether I'm going to be really down or really up or how I'm going to be. But it allowed me when I woke up and let's say I was really down and just could not get out of bed and could not function and go to work. It allowed me the opportunity to simply email her and say, you know what, I'm just having one of those days. I'll be back tomorrow. I would always put in nothing to worry about because she would always worry that something was going wrong. She was lovely and she was always worried. So I said, nothing to worry about. I'll be back tomorrow. And it goes to what you're saying is it shortened, I think, the duration because if I had forced myself to go to work that day, I wouldn't have gotten the rest that I so clearly needed because I ended up just staying home and sleeping. But if I didn't have that day of rest, then it could have gone on and on. It could have turned into a short-term disability leave.
Oh, that's amazing. It's amazing. Any other comments on that one? No? I think I have time for one more question, and then I'm going to have the panel give some closing remarks if there is another question out there. No? Okay. I have one more here. What's one thing that an employer could do to encourage disclosure? and make their employees feel more comfortable? What's one thing that they could go and do today?
I can tell, well, when I disclosed that I had a spinal cord injury to Spinal Cord Injury Ontario, I knew that it was actually going to benefit me because I have personal lived experience. But as an employee, what I really look up to is that the leadership is reflective and that I have leaders that I look up to who are persons with disabilities, visible or invisible, which tells me that it is not, it enables growth and a better mindset for me as a person who's, working there.
Fantastic. David? The microphone swap.
Yep. What I would say personally, whomever's meeting with the job candidate or the client or what have you, just one simple question: how can I help you? That gives a fair amount of strength to the individual that that person is meeting with. How can I help you? Is there anything I can do to make you feel at ease?
Great. Amal?
I would say if there's one thing employers can do, it's that they should, if they walk the talk, that helps. So if they show that they have a diverse workforce and they have people with disabilities, and I know invisible disabilities are harder, but it shows that they actually do what they preach. Is this my last chance to make a
No,
comment?
you're going to get one more chance.
Okay.
You're going to get one more chance. Elaine?
And I think going on that, I think the first step would be for senior executives to talk about it in their speeches and talk about it in their internal communications to staff so that staff can begin to get acclimatized to it as well. And it also continues to get reinforced in that president or that CEO or that senior level executive's mind.
So I would say along the same lines, kind of branding and showing, educating the staff and the external community that we are a diverse and inclusive worksite, and show that there are success stories, share our success stories, and make people feel welcome that they would want to work in a workforce like ours.
That's great. Excellent. Well, thank you, everybody. Now, I'd just like to give you each an opportunity to say some closing remarks. Now, most of the people who are here with us today are job seekers, people who have a disability, who are looking for work or looking to change their career. So do you have any words of wisdom that you would like to share? And just so you also know, this is being recorded, so we will be sharing this with people online later, so they'll be able to access your valuable nuggets of gold. So think hard, and who wants to go first? Amal, you look leaned right in. So let's start with Amal.
I don't remember what you asked, but I know what I'm going to say.
That's great.
So if you're a person with a disability, or you're here with someone with a disability, and you're interested in a career in banking, and you're stuck and you're not getting past the online system, my name is in your program guide, and my email address is my first name dot my last name at cibc.com, and I will ensure that somebody meets with you face to face. And
you're going to get a lot of
even if it's a
emails.
coaching session, so I'm happy to do that.
That's fantastic. Who wants to go next? All right, David? Mic exchange?
I think this is the one that
Sorry about that. Yeah, I echo Amal's comments. I'm more than happy to meet with you. I'm more than happy to connect you with any number of different disability organizations. I'm more than happy to provide any sort of wisdom, insight as a person with a disability. And please, if you want to meet with me, don't hesitate. I'm more than happy to.
Fantastic. Thank you. I think Lubna's ready.
I believe that knowledge is power. So educate yourself. That is empowering yourself. So find out about what you are comfortable with and research your employers. Ask questions to people who are helping you. That, like as an employment counselor, if I have persons asking me questions, 100 questions, this tells me that you are engaged in your job search and you want the answer. So don't be afraid. Ask questions. There are lots of online resources that are available. make a use of it so that when you go for an interview, you do not come across as someone who's not prepared. You come across as confident. And another thing, because I do know there are recruiters here, all the companies want to hire bright and intelligent and productive people. It's really unfortunate if you think that people with disabilities need to be excluded from that group. Please, that is not fair. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. Tanya or Elaine, are you gonna? Who wants to go first?
I just say don't sell yourself short. Know what you want, go for it. If the employer doesn't hire you, doesn't reach out to you, then it's not a good fit. Make sure you are with an organization who's going to value you for the skills that you have, and a good employer will. So look at yourself and sell those great attributes that you have.
And I think just to follow on that, I would suggest to follow what your gut is saying. So the gut is never wrong. It's been my experience. So follow that and do what is best for yourself, really. Think about it, take some time, and do what you feel comfortable doing.
Thank you. Thank you to our panelists today, and I'd like everybody to give them a big round of applause. And I think they'll be hanging out for a while in case there's some questions.